come this far, guys. The 26th and final episode of the second series, Thomas and the Missing Christmas Tree, based on the book of the same name by Christopher Awdry. Not only was this the final episode for the second series, but it was also the final time that Sir Ringo Starr would narrate for the show. But is it a good finale? Let's have a look. It is December 23rd, the day before Christmas Eve, or as I like to call it, Christmas Eve, and the final preparations are being made for a carol party to be held at Tidmouth. The engines are working hard setting up the decorations. This year the Fat Controller wants the carol party to be extra special. The Fat Controller is waiting very impatiently when Thomas arrives. He tells Thomas that their Christmas tree has come and Thomas has to fetch it while Duck watches over Annie and Campbell. Thomas asks the Fat Controller if he and the other engines can sing the carols too, and the Fat Controller promises to think about it. Thomas is very excited and rushes off, collecting the tree safely, but on the way home he ends up stuck in a snowdrift. Thomas knows that he must arrive back in time and whistles for help, but cannot back out of the heavy snow. Suddenly, an avalanche erupts and buries Thomas and the tree. Back at the yards, the engines are waiting for Thomas. His delay begins to make them cross, but they are silenced by the Fat Controller, who tells them that snow has knocked the telephone lines down and they must assume that Thomas is stranded. Everyone now feels sorry and Donald and Douglas puff away to save him. They soon reach a snowdrift much deeper than the rest. A cry for help is heard and Donald thinks he hears something, but Douglas thinks it may just be the wind. Hearing the cry carefully, they realise that they are at the drift where Thomas is buried. Time passes as the workmen dig through the snow and free him. Thomas's driver and firemen, who had taken shelter at a nearby cottage, join the rescue, and Thomas is freed from the snow. Thomas follows the twins home and they arrive just as night falls. The Fat Controller rewards the engines by granting them permission to sing the carols. The engines happily chuff away to the station. The lights come on and the Fat Controller declares 3 cheers for Thomas and his friends. Harold the helicopter soon joins the party, bringing Father Christmas, much to everyone's joy. As the carols begin, Thomas tells Percy that although getting stuck in the snow was no fun, it was all worth it for the celebration and wishes everyone a Merry Christmas. This was the second Christmas-centered episode of the TV series, and like Series 2 as a whole, I find this one better than Thomas's Christmas Party. Not saying that I hate Thomas's Christmas Party or anything, that was a really good Christmas episode. But like the rest of Series 2, Thomas and the Missing Christmas Tree ups it a notch compared to the last series. And if, like me, you were introduced to the Railway series books as well as the books based on the TV series episodes in your childhood as well as the TV series, then you'll know that the book version of this story is extended compared to the TV episode. The book has a lot more going on in it compared to the TV episode, which sticks to the 5-minute format. And because the book is much longer than the TV series version is, then I see no reason why they couldn't have extended the episode to 10 minutes. Much like how they did with Fireman Sam's Christmas special, extending it to 20 minutes compared to the original 10-minute episode runtime. So I see no reason why they couldn't have just extended this episode to be a 10-minute episode so they could fit the whole story in. But that's just a nitpick, and it doesn't come close to ruining this Christmas episode, which is one of my favourites. In fact, I love it so much that I actually made an extended version of this special of my own a few years ago for my Thomas series. Of course, adding in my own humour to it, and taking some inspiration from the extended book version, because I wanted to give the extended book version some more attention at the time. So that just leaves it open for fans to make their own extended versions of this great episode. You know, we could have just taken the long way back. What, and ruined the plot? And as I mentioned, this was the final episode Sir Ringo Starr narrated before he left to pursue his musical career. And like every other episode he's narrated for this series, you could tell how much fun he was having narrating this story and saying all these lines. It was evident that he must have had a really fun time narrating for this TV series. And he would still hold the memory of it dear in his heart, even to this day. Thomas's snowdrift accident is very reminiscent of Thomas Terence in the Snow from Series 1, when Thomas got stuck in the snowdrift and had to be rescued by Terence. But this time it's more serious, since he gets completely buried in this episode. Then Donald and Douglas had to bring workmen round to dig him out. It's actually a lot more serious than it was in Thomas Terence in the Snow, which makes it all the more enduring and exciting compared to the previous Snow episodes. And it's once again nice to see Donald and Douglas be the heroes of the story, like what they were in The Deputation when Henry got stuck in a snowdrift. It's just really nice to see them take centre stage every once in a while. The final shot of the episode, where every single character shows up, is just reminiscent of Thomas's Christmas party, where we see all the characters that were introduced for Series 1 show up at Tidmouth Sheds. Although one thing that may confuse people is the fact that Devious Diesel shows up at the party instead of Daisy the Diesel railcar. Now this is very confusing because the Fan Controller sent him packing episodes ago, so why would he just show up out of the blue? It was so confusing in fact that a Thomas the Tank Engine fan on Twitter actually edited the pictures so that Daisy would take Diesel's place, which would have been more fitting since Daisy did stay on the railway. But my guess is they must have just forgot about the Daisy model and just wanted to give Diesel's model a last hurrah, much like how they did with Henry's old shape model in Thomas's Christmas party. Despite being in his new shape, Henry's old shape got one last hurrah in the final scene. And the shot of Thomas running past Duck and Annie and Clarabelle at Tidmouth Station is very reminiscent of the shot from The Runaway, when Thomas runs past Duck in the exact same station. It's just a really touching callback to that previous episode that was also written by Christopher. And also, the two really did have a knack for confusing the Scottish twins' faces with Edward's faces, since in this scene one of the twins is wearing Edward's angry face. And I forgot to mention in my review of Saved from Scrap that Edward was wearing one of the twins' worried faces in one scene. It's just funny how they keep putting the wrong faces on the wrong engines at certain points in the TV series. But that's just human error, and you can't really blame them for making that mistake. I mean, sometimes I've even made mistakes in my videos and I don't notice until the last minute. Sometimes I don't even notice until it's too late. So it's just human error, and it happens to the best of us. Like every other snow episode from the TV series, this is just so beautiful with the atmosphere. All the snow-covered countrysides, the snow-covered station, and the snow-covered yards. It just really brings me back to my childhood, and I always look forward to watching this episode every Christmas. And that moment of Howard the helicopter bringing Father Christmas to the party is very whimsical. It just brings out your childlike imagination and the days where you reminisce about Father Christmas bringing you presents on Christmas Eve. It's just another one of those moments that dives right back into your childhood fantasy and your memories of Christmas from when you were kids. It's another thing that makes this episode all the more special around this time of year. I feel that Thomas and the Missing Christmas Tree is definitely a satisfying conclusion to the second series. It brings all the characters minus Daisy together for a big Christmas party. It's a great Christmas story to wrap up on, and it's just so beautiful with the atmosphere and the camera work and the set pieces. It's one that will get you into the Christmas spirit every time around this time of year, so it's definitely worth a watch. And that was all 26 episodes of Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends Series 2. It's been a real blast going through this series episode by episode. The second series is a series of the show that just gets better and better every time I rewatch it. And it's been a hell of a blast going through it again, seeing all the new characters, chases, races, runaways and crash scenes, and just the all-around wonderful stories that were adapted from the Railway series, as well as new rewritten stories from Christopher Audrey. It's just been one hell of a blast going through this series again this year for Thomascember, and I'm sure I'll continue to have a blast rewatching this particular series in the future. It's definitely one of the best that Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends has to offer. So until next year, I wish you guys a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.